Hey yo, welcome back to another review of another Rocky film, this time Rocky 2. Rocky 2 is a film that has really grown on me. It's for many years, it was never really one of my favorites. I didn't really watch it that much. And after watching it again, though, I really like this movie. I actually think I would say it's as good as Rocky. I would put it on par with Rocky. There are some things about Rocky too I do think are better than Rocky. Uh, Definitely the fight. The rematch between Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa is a much better fight than the fight in Rocky, and it's a really well made fight too. It's well shot, well edited, and there's a lot of work put into it, a lot of hard work, and it shows. And by a lot of hard work, I mean 8 months of editing. Like Sylvester Stallone was like, he wanted everything to be perfect. He was a perfectionist, so he had the editing guys spend 8 months editing that final fight, the rematch, to meet his specifications. And I can't see, you know, I gotta be honest, the hard work was worth it because the fight is phenomenal. It's technically, technique-wise, the most impressive fight in the entire franchise. It's a really great fight. And I think this is a great movie too. Sylvester Stallone directs it. He also wrote the film, and Bill Conti comes back and does the score and does some new pieces of music for the film as well, which I really like, especially Redemption, which is this sort of what it is. It's kind of a 70s funked up version of the Rocky theme, and it plays after the beginning of the movie where they basically show the end fight from Rocky, which I don't really get that. That's one part about some of these sequels. I'm like, why am I getting deja vu? Why are you showing me the end fight again? Just you're a sequel. Just start. It should have just started off with them and getting sent to the hospital. The ambulances are coming, and Rocky and Creed are going in the hospital. And just the titles, Rocky 2. We don't. I mean, do you really think people aren't gonna know what happened? I mean, when this movie came out, there's some theaters were showing double features of Rocky and Rocky 2. I mean, can you imagine people see Rocky 2 and then after they already saw the Rocky in the theater, and then they're like, why am I seeing the end fight again? But I guess it's for people to catch people up, people who didn't see the first film. There's a few people in the world in 1976 that didn't see the first Rocky. Here you go. Here's what happens in the end fight. But anyway, after that, they're Stallone does this wonderful shot of the bridge and the pier, and then you see Rocky 2, the titles, and then you see the ambulances heading towards the hospital, and you have this theme it's called Redemption by Bill Conti, which I really like. It's like da na da 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 na 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 da 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 na da 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 na da. So it's got a good beat to it, and it's da 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 da. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. It's just a really I think it's an underrated score. I mean, when you hear I can't believe I'm saying this, but I can't believe there's such a thing as an underrated piece of music from the Rocky franchise, but I think that's an underrated piece of music. And of course, you have Gonna Fly Now. Of course, you have the iconic, theme in the movie as well. But Bill Conti does a great job with the score again. Cinematography by Bill Butler, I think, did a good job. There's some really gorgeous shots in this, especially in the beginning with the shots of the pier, the shots when Rocky is training in the junkyard and stuff like that. When the sun's setting and he's doing the push-ups, it's a really good shot. Really well made, well done, well crafted cinematography there. It's edited by Stanford C. Allen and Janice Hampton, and I gotta give them 2 thumbs up for their hard work and their hard effort. And 8 months of editing, that must have been tough. And the film was pretty big hit. It made $200.1 million. It was I think it might have had a bigger budget than the first film. Um, and it was one of those few sequels that I think honestly was on par with the original film. I think a lot of the sequels, except for Rocky Five, for me personally, are on par with the original or better. I mean, that's how great this franchise is in terms of its success rate. For me, 5 out of the 6 Rocky films are knockouts, which is a pretty good track record. There's a reason why it's one of my favorite franchises. There's a reason why I own like 5 Rocky shirts or close to that. I mean, I got my Italian Stallion shirt, which I've had for years. I've had this shirt since junior high, I believe. I have another Italian Stallion shirt, a yellow one. I have a gray Rocky shirt. I have 2 gray Rocky shirts. So, and I have a dark blue Rocky shirt. And I still want more. And I have a poster. I have a Rocky poster. I have a Rocky 3 poster. They're in storage right now. And I have all the Rocky novelizations because there's 4 of them. There's Rocky 2, which is also written by Sylvester Stallone. The first book was written by Julia Sorrell, but the second novelization was written by Sylvester Stallone. And Stallone did an interesting thing with Rocky 2. Anytime there was a scene dealing with Rocky, he wrote it in first person, and he did it with Rocky's broken English as well. So it was really interesting. It was basically what it was. It was like reading Rocky's mind, and he did that only for Rocky 2 though, because then I think another guy wrote the novelization for Rocky 3, and then it was pretty much straightforward adaptation. And then Rocky 4 was also written by Stallone, which is a pretty straightforward adaptation as well. But it was nice to get a little bit of Rocky's inner deep thoughts. And then that was it. There wasn't any more novelizations after that. I also have the Ultimate Guide to the Rocky Films, which is a great Dorling King's DK book. If you don't have that already and you're a Rocky fan, you need to get it. It's a great book. It's just a little overview of the Rocky franchise and stuff like that. It was a tie-in to Rocky Balboa, pretty much. But it's a really good book for Rocky fans. And I even have a painting. I have a Rocky painting, but it's in storage in Michigan at my dad's place. It's a really nice painting too. It's what it is. It's a recreation. It's a painting by an artist who decided to recreate one of the paintings that you see in Rocky 3, the big giant one where Rocky's just standing there with the belt. Um, yeah, I even have a Rocky painting. So my dad got for me years ago. So yeah, huge Rocky fan. As you can see. And but I just wanted to just throw that stuff out there. Rocky 2 has been one of those films that I wasn't really the biggest fan of, but now I'm like, after watching it again, I love this movie. I think it's an excellent film. I think it's a very underrated sequel. Um, and yeah, I really do. It's about 119 minutes. It's the same length as the first film. Sylvester Stallone returns as Rocky, of course. Talia Shire also comes back. I mean, there's all the regulars that you would think would come back for this movie do. Stallone, Talia Shire, Burt Young as Paulie, Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed, which I really liked how they handled Apollo's character in this. I liked how they had these scenes. They dealt with him doubting himself and thinking that maybe I was easy on Rocky. I didn't give him my best. If I gave him my best, I'm gonna knock him out in 2 rounds. I like how they basically painted him as a villain, which was a nice change of pace. Something that this boxer, according to this film, has never really done. But he's doing it because this means a lot to him. This is like he wants to prove to the world that he's not some chump. He's not some guy who was paid to carry some bum who, for 15 rounds. No one's ever gone the distance with him, and he's going through his crisis. And I really think the film did a great job showing that. And Apollo Creed played a great bad guy. He had the charisma, and everything to just call Italian sound the Italian chicken or the Italian scallion. He was really good at that, but he was also good at being serious and tough. You saw a tougher side of Apollo that you didn't see in the first film. In the first film, he's throwing coins to the crowd versus George Washington, and here in this, he's like, you know, come November, you're mine. So it's like one of those like it's gonna go down type thing. And for the most part, Apollo really does kick Rocky's ass in this fight. He just gets a little bit too overzealous, and in the rematch, and that ends up being his downfall. But you see the seething inner fire starting to build within Apollo, and they even show sequences where he's reading hate mail, which I think is actually really well done. And Carl Weathers' performance in this scene is good too. It's a short scene, but it's always a scene that stood out to me. Is the whole scene where he's talking about the hate mail, and he's talking to his wife. He's in his mansion. He's like, Marianne, listen to this. You didn't beat nobody, and anybody who knows boxing knows the fight was fixed. This one came from London. You call yourself the champ? You're a fake. The fight was a fake. Go kill yourself. And Marianne, his wife's like, wouldn't you rather play with the children than read hate mail? And then Apollo continues, like, how much did you get to carry that bum for 15 rounds? You are a disgrace to your people. Marianne's like, why can't you ignore it? And he's like, are you serious? And then tosses the mail away in anger off the top of the balcony. And it's one of those things where you're like, it really does a good job showing, Apollo's perspective. And you're like, he needs to do this. And then he calls out Rocky, and at first Rocky doesn't really bother him. But then, it starts to get to him. It's being called a coward, and, that he just can't handle that. It even says, line of dialogue to Adrian where he's like, I never stop asking you to be a woman. So, you can't stop asking me to be, you can't ask me, why can't I be a man? It was really kind of a weird line of dialogue, though. It's like, I never stop asking you to be a woman, but, I gotta be a man, or something. It's sort of like, I always thought that was but it was totally something that Rocky would say, so it wasn't that out of the box. Burgess Meredith also returns as Mickey Goldmill. His performance in the first one was great too, but I think his performance in this is even better because I think Mickey has the best monologue, the best speech in this film. He goes to the chapel and near the hospital when Rocky's dealing with trying to pray for Adrian, who's in a coma. And Mickey comes in, and I don't know if I'm going to do this justice, but I'm going to do the best I can. But he comes in and delivers this great speech as he's talking to Rocky. Hey, Rock, it's 3 in the morning. I went up to your house there, and they told me you was here. It's 3 a.m., kid. You know that Adrian? She's a good girl. Me, I'm sorry for the both of you. There's nothing I can do about it. Except, I want to tell you this once, and then I ain't gonna say it again. But Rock, you got another shot. This is the second shot. And, I don't know, the biggest title in the world. And you're gonna be swapping punches with the most dangerous fighter in the world. And just in case you know, your brain ain't working so good. All this happens pretty soon, and you ain't ready. You're nowhere near in shape. So I say, for God's sake, why don't you stand up and fight this guy hard, like you done before? That was beautiful. But don't lay down like this. Like, I don't know, some kind of mongrel or something. Because he's gonna kick your face in pieces. That's right. This guy doesn't want to win, He wants to bury you. He wants to humiliate you. He wants to prove to the whole world that you was nothing but some kind of freak the first time out. He said you were a one-time lucky bum. Well, now, I don't want to get mad in a biblical place like this. I think you're a hell of a lot more than that, kid. A hell of a lot. Well, now, wait a minute. If you want to blow this thing, if you want to blow it, then damn it, I'm gonna blow it with you. If you want to stay here, I'll stay with you. I stay with you. I stay and pray. What do I got to lose? So I thought that was a great sequence, great speech by Burgess Meredith. And forgive me if I sound more like Robert Shaw than Burgess Meredith. I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. But I'd show the clip, but it'd get copyright claim, and then, you know, I want to talk about the scene. I want to at least give the scene, it's just due, and I think by at least doing my best impression, I do that. Tony Burton also comes back as Duke. Paul's father figure, his friend, his trainer, and his manager. He actually gets the name Duke in this movie. Joe Spinell also has a little cameo in the film as well. Um, and yeah, so everybody pretty much returns to the original cast. And I guess originally Adrian was supposed to be at the big fight, the rematch. However, because Talia Shire was working on another movie at the time, the storyline was changed to having her stay home and watch the fight on TV. The scenes of her watching the boxing match on TV were shot and then edited into the movie several months after filming on the fight scenes had finished. And yeah, so Stallone also tried to get Chuck Wepner, the real life inspiration for Rocky, and he tried to get him in this film as a trainer named Chink Weber. And according to Wepner, he read for Sylvester Stallone, but he did very poorly. And then the character was deleted from the script. The name Chink Weber, though, ended up being used for Sonny Landham's character in Lock Up. So I thought that was pretty interesting that character name was still used later in the film. I mean, later, not really later in the film, but used later in another film, in Lock Up. And Stallone was preparing for this movie. He was getting in shape, and he decided to do something foolish. He decided to challenge Olympic weightlifter Franco Columbu to a weightlifting competition. Well, Stallone ended up lifting too much weight that his body couldn't handle, and he tore the muscle that connects his right right here, like this muscle right here that connects your arm to basically to your shoulder. I mean, it's a pretty big muscle, pretty important muscle. He tore it, and so he was still hurt when he was doing the fight. You couldn't really tell, but kudos to Stallone for gutting through that, and it's something that really hurt him for the rest of his career. That's why when he got older, he ended up taking he ended up taking more of the extra supplements of testosterone and these other sort of shots that he'd been taking. He took those shots, and he was prescribed to them by the doctor because he couldn't build up muscle very well on that side of his chest on it anymore, or his arm, because of the fact that that muscle was severely damaged. And that was also the main reason why Rocky went and decided to fight Apollo right-handed, because Stallone had messed up his left shoulder. It wasn't really his right, it was his left. So I was pointing to the wrong one, but it was like his left arm messed up his left arm, so that's why he ended up boxing with his right, which really ended up helping the film and making it stand out more, because it was really interesting to see Rocky have to learn how to fight with his right arm instead of just being a southpaw like he normally is. So that's one little bit of trivia I wanted to share with everybody, because it's something that I remember reading in Stallone's. He did a book where he's just a motivation. It was like a book where he was talking about exercise. It was an exercise book, pretty much. I rented it a long time ago from the library. Checked it out from the library because I'm a big Stallone fan. And then I read it, and that's something that always stood out to me. It's his story about challenging Franco Columbu and then tearing and messing up his arm. Messing up his left. Tore his right. It's actually his right pectoral muscle. But I thought it was his left. But I guess it could be his right. Either way, he tore a pectoral muscle, which is pretty bad. Either one, it did make it hard for him to do certain stuff. So anyway, the film takes place in 1976. Even though Stallone's hairstyle and even Talia Shire's hairstyle is different than it was in the first movie, but that's a little nitpick. I don't really, it doesn't even bother me at all. It's just something I noticed. So the film starts out after the fight on New Year's Day. Apollo Creed has successfully defended his heavyweight title in a split decision, and he and Rocky are taken to the same hospital. Apollo challenges Rocky to a rematch, but Rocky declines and announces his retirement. And this is a good scene where Apollo's just talking to him, and he's all like, you know, anytime, anywhere, I'm gonna beat you. I won. I'll take you on, my boy. You know, I thought you said there was not gonna be no rematch. And so, Apollo though wants the rematch. And then I like this scene after they have their barbs at each other. And this is just this little quiet scene where Rocky, after had the surgery done, he goes in and he knocks on Apollo's his hospital room door, and he asks him, he's like, "Hey Apollo, hey yo Apollo," and Apollo's like, "Who is it?" "It's me, Rocky. I got something I want to ask you." "Okay. Did you give me your best?" And then Apollo's like, "Yeah." And Rocky's like, "Okay." But it was just a very little subtle scene, but I always liked that. But then you find out later in the film when Apollo's doing this, trying to be he's being the bad guy, bad mouthing Rocky. And in the press conference, when Rocky decides to do the rematch, Apollo's talking about how I didn't give him his best. How I did not give him my best. Yeah, and Rocky, of course, was looking at him like, "Wait a second, Apollo. You told me in the hospital that you gave me your best." So it was one of those. It was an interesting. So it set it up, and Rocky never really said that. I'm speaking for Rocky there, but he definitely did think that way, and he gave him a look like, "Wait a second, that's not what really happened." So anyway, Rocky has had a pretty bad injury after the first fight with Apollo, because the doctors tell him that he had a detached retina, and so he needs surgery for it, and this could lead to permanent blindness if he decides to box again. So he decides to retire. Adrian supports his choice. Rocky just gets discharged from the hospital. He enjoys life now. He likes getting out of the hospital, and he decides to propose to Adrian in the zoo, which is a nice, sweet scene. And of course, Adrian says yes. And since Rocky's never had this much money before, most of his money was taken away by taxes, of course, because that's how it happens. So, if he's supposed to make like 100, what was it, 100 grand or 150,000 or something like that, and like he only made out with 37. But since Rocky's not used to having all this money, he starts spending too much money. Spends it on money on a new car, spends money on Adrian for new clothes and perfume and watches, but he's doing that under the realization that he's going to get this big advertising deal. So he spends this money, buys a new house, of course marries Adrian, they have their wedding, and then, well, he tries the advertising thing out, but it doesn't work out because he can't read very well. And so it's a total disaster. And so that's out the window. And so then Rocky tries to get a business job so they can pay better, a job in business, and working, sitting at a table, working with numbers and stuff like that. And no one will hire him. Even people are saying, why don't you box? Why don't you fight? I heard you're a good fighter. And Rocky is struggling to find work. He wants to support his wife Adrian. She also is pregnant. So he's trying to support not only her, but her his child who's going to be born pretty soon. He's trying to do what every man wants to do, support, his family. And so he's stuck with only limited options for work, and he's stuck with getting a job doing menial labor, working at the meat shop, at the meat plant, at the Shamrock Meat Factory, hanging up meat racks of beef and doing, a really dirty job, and not even getting paid for full time. And then to make matters worse, he loses that job. And his boss is played by Frank McRae, who I thought was really nice to see him. Frank McRae was also in Paradise Alley, so Stallone's directorial debut, the film that had come out before this. And I've seen that film too, and I actually like that movie too. I think it's pretty underrated, Paradise Alley. Um, and Stallone also did Fist around the same time as well, and I think that's another underrated movie, but they didn't make as much money. It was Rocky 2 that helped, you know, get Stallone back into people's good graces and in Hollywood's good graces, so to speak. Even though he tried to do more serious projects with Paradise Alley and Fist, and he did great jobs in both of them, and performance-wise, and directing with Paradise Alley. It just didn't work out for some reason, so he ended up having to do Rocky 2 to pay the bills and to stay working. So that's kind of, Rocky 2 is kind of like Stallone maybe didn't want to keep relying on Rocky to pay the bills and to keep his career going, but just like Rocky didn't want to have to work in a meat factory, but had to do it. And sadly, though, he can't keep the job. He gets laid off. So now he has no income and no source of anything. He realizes, maybe what he's supposed to do in life is be a fighter. That's all he's supposed to do. So Rocky ends up trying to, train a bit on his own in his basement, hit the bag. Adrian's not supporting his decision because she is worries about him a lot, and she doesn't want him to go blind, which is understandable. And Adrian, though, decides to make him think, okay, maybe you don't need to fight. I'll get a part-time job at the pet shop. I'll go work at the pet shop again. We need the money. And Rocky's like, no, but I don't want you to do that. I'm supposed to support you. It's supposed to be my job. And she's like, no, we need the money, Rocky. And so she goes back to the pet shop. And I think the film handled this sort of deja vu well. It really did. Yeah, she goes back to work at the pet shop, but there's a reason for it. It's not just because, oh, all right. Yeah, she just decides to do it or whatever. No, there's a reason for it. They need the money. They really do. They need to pay their mortgage. Rocky even gives Paulie his new car. And Paulie is now working his old job at the docks, being enforcer, being a leg breaker. And Paulie's like, if you need a handout, just ask me, Rocco, you need a handout, And Rocky's like, no, I don't need anything, Paulie. You want to buy this car? And so Paulie buys the car. And Rocky, he decides to try to talk to Mickey, see if he can start to fight again. And Mickey basically was telling him that you can't do it because of your eye. You can't see. And and he basically was pretty much telling him that it's not going to work because you can't see out of his one eye. Apollo's going to destroy you. And after he slaps Rocky in the face with his left hand, this is what Mickey says. He's like, "Now you didn't even see that coming, did you? That's coming from a broken down punk like me. Broken down punk like me. What do you think the champ would do to you? Hurt me bad, I guess. Nah, hurt you permanent. Permanent!" So, and then Rocky decides, though, he doesn't want to be away from this. He doesn't want to be away from the sweat and the boxing. He's just not ready to be away from that yet. So he gets another menial job as pretty much as a janitor, working at the old gym, at Mickey's gym, cleaning up, spit. And there's this one guy who would never ever try to talk tough to Rocky if he wasn't in this position, spitting in his bucket and being like, Rocky's picking up the spit bucket, ready to empty him out, and the guy's like, "Hey, wait a minute." Yeah, and he's like, and Rocky doesn't really say much, and then he's like, "What? That's the toughest thing you could come up with?" And the guy would have gotten his ass handed to him you know, if Rocky wasn't in this position. But this is a pretty demeaning position, and even and Gazzo visits and tells him, you can get your old job back, but Rocky's become more of a religious guy. He's got the cross around his neck, and he doesn't want to do that kind of stuff anymore. And Gazzo's like, "Oh, you want to keep healthy, right? That's understandable. You remember that guy, Rock?" And he points to a cardboard cutout of Rocky. When he went in and before he fought Apollo the first time. And so Rocky decides, all right, because while this is all going on, Apollo is doing all kinds of stuff. Put out a newspaper cartoon calling him the Italian Chicken, and Rocky decides, okay, I gotta fight the fight. So he decides to do it. He decides to get ready for the fight, and I love how and Adrian does not support him, but he's got to do what he's got to do, and it's going to pay a lot of money too as well. So it'll help them pay the rent, and I love how Mickey after Rocky decides he's going to do the rematch, Mickey's like knocking on the door, and he's like, "Well, what are we waiting for?" It's like, yeah, all right. And but it doesn't turn out so well. Rocky's having a hard time training, having a hard time focusing. Mickey's trying to get him to become a right-handed fighter because he's in order to take, to protect his bad eye and to throw Apollo off and give him a better chance of winning and not getting knocked out and destroyed by Apollo the second time around. And he's trying to get Rocky to be fast. Get him to be greasy, lightning fast. So he has him decide he's trying to get him to catch a chicken, which I thought was pretty clever. So he's trying to get him to catch a chicken, and Mickey's talking to Rocky. He's like, "Why do you have to wear that stinking sweatsuit? It brings me luck, brings you luck. I'll tell you what it brings. It brings flies. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to chase this little chicken." "Hey, yo, Mick, what do I gotta chase a chicken for?" "First, because I said so. And second, it's because chicken chasing is how we used to train back in the old days. If you can catch this thing, you can catch greased lightning." Well, I'll do it if you say so. But it ain't very mature." "Well, neither are you very mature." And so he can't catch the chicken, and he just gives up. And he even says, "I feel like a Kentucky Fried Idiot." And so he can't do it. He can't focus because he's thinking about Adrian. He's thinking about what's going on. And Paulie sees this and decides he's going to confront Adrian about it at the pet shop. And this doesn't go off very well. She fights back for her, for her point of view, and says, you know, he could go blind. I love him. You don't. And then she collapses. And then Rocky goes to visit her in the hospital. She had the baby a month early, but the baby's fine. But she's in a coma because of all the stress that she had working at the pet shop and dealing with the stuff with Rocky's decision to fight has caused her to hemorrhage. So she's in a coma now. And so Rocky ends up, okay, can't really train. So he stays he stays at his own bedside though. He stays at Adrian's bedside, prays for her in the chapel next door, and reads to her, holds her hand, and Mickey stays there in the chapel and prays for her as well. And when she does wake up, it's such an epic moment. She wakes up, and Rocky's like, he pretty much says, "What am I gonna do?" And it's not as soon as she wakes up. Like after, like the morning after she wakes up, and they see the baby together. And Rocky didn't see the baby because he was waiting to see it with his wife, Adrian. And they see the baby, and Rocky's thinking about staying here, staying with her, and he doesn't know what to do because he's got a fight coming up. He still has to train for it. And he's like, "What am I gonna do, Adrian?" And Adrian says, "Win, win." And it's so simple, but it's so epic. And then, of course, then Bill Conti's music starts up, and you know, then it's come on, I gotta remember the Rocky theme. I mean, dun 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 dun. Dun-dun-dun, 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 dun-dun, 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 dun-dun. And it just starts up, gonna fly now, training, is running with all these school kids. There's like 800 school children, like 800 extras. And he's running, runs up the steps, he's doing all the other stuff too, which is it's a training montage. You gotta love it. And he's like using a sledgehammer and mashing junk in the junkyard, lifting up, this piece of wood and carrying it around, leaping over park benches. It's just it's the stuff of legends. I mean, the Rocky montages are just awesome. That's what everybody that's like that you're waiting for that moment in any Rocky film, the montage. And so the training montage is awesome. And then you get to the rematch, and it's amazing. It's an excellent fight. I love the way it's shot, the cinematography, the editing, the the choreography. Everything about this final fight was everything that the first fight wasn't. The fight in the first film wasn't. I mean, Apollo versus Rocky in the first film never really had that big size and scope. It never really felt like it was a big fight. This feels like it. You can hear the crowd in the background, the surround sound. You can see the punches connect. The choreography is so much better. It doesn't look like amateur hour. It's it's a phenomenal, excellent fight, amazing fight. Not my personal favorite fight. My personal favorite fight is the fight between Rocky and Clubber in Rocky 3, the second fight between those two. But this is definitely a close second. I love this fight. And Paulo was dominating throughout most of the fight. But then it gets to the final round, and Apollo gets overzealous, and even his trainers tell him, "Stay away from him! Stay away from him!" And Apollo, "Don't go for the knockout! You got the win!" And Apollo wants to knock him out. He can't live with himself if he just gets another split decision. But he wouldn't even get a split decision. He'd win outright. But he just can't live with himself if it's not a knockout. And well, Rocky surprises him, hits him with a left. They both fall flying down to the canvas in slow motion. Really well shot. Love the different angles of the camera and everything. And even earlier in the fight, awesome slow-mo shots of like Rocky getting just pummeled in the face. And there's even like some shots like in high def, it just looked phenomenal on Blu-ray, where like Rocky's hitting Apollo and just blood and spit just flying everywhere. It was great. The fight just felt really like you were there. It was like one of those like really immersive fights. And the makeup effects too was good on the different damages that are done to their faces and stuff like that, the different bruises. And Paul broke Rocky's nose again, and so Rocky hits Apollo. Apollo goes for the knockout too. They all fall down in slow mo, and Rocky, you have the count. Rocky gets up before Apollo does. Apollo can't make it. Rocky gets up. He wins the title. And it's just something that, come on, I mean, it's always a great moment when Rocky wins the title. He wins the title, and then you have that iconic moment, that iconic quote, where he's exhausted. He's completely exhausted. He's crying, and he makes a victory speech to everyone. "Excuse me, I can't believe this has happened. I can't. And I just want to say thanks to Paul for fighting me. Paul, I want to thank Mickey for training me. And there's fans in the arena. We love you, Rock. Yeah, I love you too. I just want to thank God. And except for my kid being born, this is the greatest night in the history of my life. I just want to say one thing to my wife who's at home. You, Adrian! I did it! And then, she cries in happiness, and she's like, I love you. I love you. And then Rocky hugs Mickey, and then you get to zoom in, and then it's just, and then Bill Conti's music swells, and I'm like smiling from ear to ear. I'm just smiling thinking about that scene. And then, I even cry tears of joy every time at the end of Rocky 2. And that's Rocky 2. I really don't know what to say about Rocky 2. I mean, that's it, really. It's an excellent movie. It's a great sequel. It's a very underrated sequel. I don't think it deserves to be ranked so far below the first film or a bad sequel. It's like 76% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, just way too low for in my opinion. It's a film that I might have agreed with some people with its lesser quality when I was younger, but as an adult watching it again, there's so many things about it that are just great. From the writing, the directing, the cinematography, the editing, to the fight itself, the big fight itself. It's everything that you want out of a sequel, and then some. It's also very engaging and interesting. In some ways, the plot is more interesting than the first film because it's not just a rehash of the first movie. Just because Talia Shire, Adrian goes to work at the pet shop again, and we have the same opponent at the end fight, doesn't really make it the same film. They really do a good job making it feel like a different movie. It's not the same film. I don't get those criticisms. It's not the same movie as the first film. It's different. And those differences are what makes it stand out from the first film and are what makes it as good as the first film for me. So yeah, I really don't know what to say about the film, except if it was a rate out of 5 stars, I would give Rocky 2 4.5 out of 5 stars. But thank you for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.